I'm Danny Taylor, under House Under Magic as my production name.
I'm Abe Sieferth. Welcome to Spacebar Studios.
I moved to New York 10 years ago, and yeah, before that playing a lot of bands. I mean, pretty standard origin story. And yeah, just really a lot of, in my own projects and a lot of my own bands, was always recording myself, you know, and then that just branched more and more into doing work for other people, doing a lot of production. Coming here was to have, you know, kind of a central location within New York, and to have a home base, really, for what I was doing. It's grown from that.
You know, lived in the city now for over a decade, playing in bands and all that, and but then I worked at DFA Studios under James Murphy, and managed his studio, did a lot of engineering there, and the space became open, and it was an opportunity for me to move into the space and do it my way, not someone else's way, and have control over a space, and it was a great opportunity I jumped on.
We're in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, right across the river from the United Nations, straight shot.
We are very close to the waterfront, Transmitter Park, and just also down the street from a lot of other studios that seem to be keep opening here in this area.
So, well, not just studios, but I mean just the neighborhood in general is obviously, since Williamsburg, Brooklyn, this little quadrant, you know, 4 blocks or so, is definitely coming up as the studio's been here for a while, so it's coming up around it, you know, rather than trying to move in or build a studio somewhere that, you know, is on the rise. This has already been here. So.
In the past, it has been a little bit separated, the idea of House Under Magic and Spacebar maybe being these different things that we're now trying to unify. But, you know, the concept of the studio has always been this more of a production mixing facility. You know, it's a place where you can make an album from start to finish, but it's typically working with bands that we're recording really no more than 2 musicians at a time. We're never doing jazz records here. We're not doing classical records here. We're doing a lot of indie and pop related things in regards to that. That's as much about the physical limitations of the space, but also just where I've come from working anyways. That's kind of the music that was happening at DFA. So it's a lot of synth heavy music. And then, so that's kind of been the focus of the space.
And I think the way it's laid out and the way that we've tried to, you know, evolve it, and which it certainly has, and how it's been working, is that the real asset of the space is that it's a continual creative area. That if a band is coming in here, and I feel this is important in any studio, that you get this kind of real separation of church and state between the control room and the live room, you know, whose domain each is in terms of the engineer or the band performer.
There's a central live room that's connected to both control rooms, and the idea is kind of actually have the whole studio be modular in of itself. So it's like either control room can be the master control room, and either control room could be another live room. Electronic music or pop music or indie music that's influenced by electronics. It often starts from there. You know, I'd say mass majority of it is like things that have synths involved, but still have a lot of live elements involved too. So that can go as far as straight up house music, but also can go to the other side of the spectrum from like folk music that wants something a little added electronic in it, you know. So it's like that might sound very narrow when I first say it, but it can actually go as far from folk to house music. And it tends to be a lot of mixing, and then you know, and I do a lot of drum recording here as well. And albums have been made from start to finish here as well. But sometimes it's often kind of compartmentalized. Maybe they track drums somewhere else, but now they want to do all their vocals and their synths here, you know, because it's a smaller room.
Which is a very common, I think.
Very common
process now.
Yeah. People like to hop around different studios. It's kind of fun, you know. So maybe they'll go somewhere else for drums and then come here for vocals. Maybe they go to their other friend who has like their crazy guitar amp collection, come back here, do some more synths. edit in the other room, mix in here when it's all said and done, and that's kind of the idea of how things work a little bit. So.
Yeah, and the same. I mean, in my work, a lot of it is the mixture of the kind of organic drums, instruments, whatever, mixed with electronic elements. And having the space where any of those things can easily be tracked, recorded, mixed, sequenced, whatever. And we have the ability to do that rather than a space with like a small vocal booth where it's like, well, we can do some vocal overdubs, but that's about it. Here, we can, you know, if a live kit needs to be put on top of something, we can easily do that. So I feel like that, for me, that's the real virtue of the space, is that anything that needs to be done can be done.
Here in Room A, I mean, first and foremost is the SSL Console that Danny and I worked together to really pick some specific modules and how we wanted to fill that up. We have the Apogee converters, the Symphony system, which we really like. I don't know how specific you want to get, but we have a lot of different preamps, still some 500, mix of 500 and normal outboard, your distressors, your Fatsos, your synthesizers. I've had a lot of different synths, and over at DFA worked a lot of different synths and really got to know which ones I liked and which ones I didn't. And this is what I've narrowed it down to.
I mean, if Abe was to describe this as, you know, his favorite choice stuff that he's kind of narrowed down, B, between our partner Matthew and I think is much more of the kind of oddball black sheep, you know, synth collection of really interesting, unique pieces, but definitely not like your more bread and butter stuff. And that's, in saying that, I think a lot more of Abe's collection would actually get used on a record, whereas the other collection impresses clients certainly, but a lot of people walk in. Right. Well, no, it's more than lights, but it's we have a full modular, quite a bit of modular Eurorack, and I mean, even in terms of outboard, we have, you know, say like a Publison, you know, French kind of on-ball effects processor. We have a Prophet VS, which, you know, you don't see many of those. We have a Memory Moog, Prophet 5, Korg vocoder, another MS-20 with the sequencer, and Lindrum 808. You know, so yeah. I mean, again, I feel like that room is much more the toy room. It came out that we were looking at the 611 EQs because we had both been into that, and it was announced that, you know, surprised. And looking at it immediately, I think both of our reactions were very much like, well, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That it exactly fit what we were looking for. Not only our workflow, but also space-wise, in terms of the way that it's put together and laid out. The way that it fits within the setup that was here before. I mean, literally the dimensions of it were almost the exact.
Yeah, it's the old desk, yeah.
Exact same as the previous, you know, in the box, slight outboard setup that we had.
Well, I'd like to add on that, on the last thing too, just like one thing about all these consoles, I was excited to see a console that didn't have such a focus on the preamps either. Mm-hmm. Like it's only, even though it's a 24 up to 32 channel board to mix down, I'd see these consoles and like, because of the way we work here, we don't need 32 channels of preamps, and we already own a lot of preamps that we like and use. So that the console is really focused on mixing and the way it works with, we still do a lot of in-the-box processing too. And the combination for hybrid mixing and hybrid workflow, it really seems to make sense.
Yeah, but I don't think it's focused on mixing.
Sure.
I think it's not focused on itself.
Right.
It's focused on what you want to do, rather than being like, I'm this type of console made by this company having this sound.
Right.
And I think that's a testament to SSL willing to kind of give the choice to their customer rather than forcing it on them in terms of brand.
And the way we chose the modules, we went with 8 EQ, 8 compressors, and there's two reasons for that. One is working with drums. We tend to use 8 mics on drums. It's kind of a standard thing. And whether it's in a recording or a mixing setting, having those first 8 channels just come up with the EQ, and then the way the console works with the 4 different compressors, send them to a different bus, audition different compressors, and the fact that it's all just like toggle. You can toggle buttons. You just keep no patching required of being able to like toggle in and out different kinds of bus compression to see how it's reacting, see how it sounds, whether it's both in the tracking or the mixing process.
Improve the workflow. It's amplified, I think, both of the way that both of us work, and just made making music and mixing easier, which I think is what a good piece of gear should do. A lot of the guys that have worked almost exclusively in the box get frustrated when they're presented with an outboard situation where just to find out how something sounds, they have to spend time patching, and I think they get a little frustrated by that. Whereas here, you have that with the selection where you can instantly audition. In our case, how we've set it up with the bus compression, any mixture of bus compressors, what you would want and how it sounds and how it reacts to whatever track you put it into.
Yeah, it almost feels like a mastering console kind of. It's just like you're able to just audition different colors.
Right.
And it's just a much more intuitive and tactile thing to do. And then on the buses, to be able to have the sum with the parallels and being able to just toggle those things in and out, because that's not always even something easy to do in the computer, And it has a little extra magic in the way it does it on this console. Well, one of the most immediate things is the monitoring of the board and just hearing the speakers better. They're actually performing better with the way the crossover happens, being able to toggle the sub in and out, not being able to have it only attached to one set of speakers. So that immediate thing of just from the first moment of having everything hooked up properly, of being able to hear things better. And once again, going back to the toggling of things. But also there's sort of a high fidelity about the console. Like the fact that it's so quiet and this beautiful, clean thing, that you do feel this bigness that you're able to fill up with it, and to still be able to work in a console, like being used to working in the box and getting used to like the dead quiet noise floor and not having that change, but hearing all this new sonic color happening out of the board makes it very easy to just keep on working.
Yeah, I think the fact that that kind of SSL sound, again, the wide side stage, the clean headroom, has been preserved. It's not just a bucket for whatever modules you want to put into it. That lineage and that technical pedigree is in this form, and you don't have to have a duality to be able to like still get that response from it. I think that's great that was thought through to be able to translate that.
Yeah, I feel like the magic's kind of in the line amps so far, and like hearing how you hit those, and it was a very nice way of the way we did the LED lights on them.
It's a console, It's not just, like I said, some dumb
analog, smart dumb analog.
Yeah, it's not a facade, and it's not just a front end for your studio to like look nicer, or impress people. It's a functional thing,
It's been great. I love it. Once again, it's about the workflow. I love how quickly you can get things done on the console. The fact that you don't have to patch things. You can patch them if you want, but just the way you can get through it so quickly that way is, and workflow and being able to hear things better and being able to audition things quicker, like saves time in the end.